Welcome back, gentlemen. Where we left off last was Martin Luther had just decided, a priest from Germany had decided that all these problems that we had just talked about were just too much for the Catholic Church. The selling of indulgences was kind of the last straw for Martin Luther, and he decided that he was going to complain about this in a very formal way. He wrote down what's called the 95 Thesis in 1517. The 95 Thesis is a list of complaints of all the things that he thinks the Catholic Church is doing wrong. Now, if you look at the image here, you'll see that Martin Luther, in a very dramatic painting, is nailing. Well, he's having one of his people nail this 95 Thesis to the church door, like a wow, take that, Catholic Church. But really, in the course of history, I think it's interesting that you should know that this is not a big dramatic statement. There's a couple of things that you should know about the 95 Thesis. First of all, it's written in Latin. And what that means is that only people who speak Latin could read the 95 Thesis. It turns out that really the only people in Germany that could speak Latin were the high nobles, the king, essentially, and the Catholic Church. In addition, when people had just announcements to make in town, they nailed things to the church door. So it wasn't as dramatic as it kind of looks. If you take a look at the picture again there for you, it's not near as dramatic as it looks. Essentially, what Martin Luther wanted to do, and I think this is important for you to know, Martin Luther just wanted to start a conversation. He wanted to start a discussion with the Catholic Church about what was right, what was wrong, and how he, as a monk within the Catholic Church, could help fix those problems. Well, very quickly, the 95 Thesis is going to be translated from Latin into German. The people are going to pick it up and they are going to love his ideas. They're going to understand that finally someone is speaking their mind against the Catholic Church, and it's important for them to stand up next to him and say, Catholic Church, you're doing things wrong. He's very quickly going to gain a following. They're going to call themselves Protestants or the Protestants for the people who protest. For a couple of years, no one really pays any mind to Martin Luther because they kind of see his ideas as second rate, kind of not really a threat. Here are some of his major ideas that we're going to look at whenever we actually look at the 95 Thesis in class. Number one, God's grace must be one. It cannot be gained through good work. Jesus Christ is the head of the church, not the Pope. Commoners can interpret the Bible, not priests. Christian practices should only come from the Bible, not religious law. And then the idea of translating the Bible into different languages. All these ideas essentially are saying the Pope is bad, the people are good, and Jesus Christ is actually the head of the church, not a man on earth. So when he starts promoting these ideas a lot, I mean, the Pope is not really going to pay him too much mind. But once he gains a big enough following, the Pope is going to kind of take action. In 1520, after repeated attempts to speak with Martin Luther, Pope Leo X is going to excommunicate him. For those of you who do not understand what excommunication is, or you've never heard that word before, it essentially means that the Pope just kicked him out of heaven. According to church law, if you're excommunicated, you are not allowed to go to heaven. Now, it's up to debate how that works, but Martin Luther was no longer allowed to receive any of the sacraments, and supposedly is not allowed to heaven. In 1521, the Pope's really good friend, the Holy Roman Emperor, the leader of Germany at the time, is going to issue what's known as the Edict of Worms. The Edict of Worms declares that Martin Luther is an outlaw, and all good Catholics are allowed to kill him on the spot without punishment. That's a pretty big declaration right there. Luther is going to, of course, now that he's got a price on his head, is going to go underground. He's going to go underground, form the Protestants, spread his ideas throughout Germany, and his movement is going to grow very, very quickly. Um, I speak a lot about Martin Luther in here because he's kind of the main guy that really sparked the Reformation. But the moment that Martin Luther becomes somewhat successful in gaining tens of thousands of followers, other people around Europe are going to have roughly the same idea. He was not the only one angry about these some of these problems with the Catholic Church. One of the other people, big people, that was part of the Protestant Reformation was a man by the name of John Calvin. He's going to start the Calvinites in 1509. He's going to become very popular. Um, and he and Martin Luther met on several occasions, trying to see if they could unify their two fronts against the Catholic Church. However, they never really could make a decision. One of the main sticking points was known as predestination. John Calvin believed in predestination, which essentially said God has already decided who the saved are and who the damned are, and if you're a person that generally does good things in the world, that's because God's influencing you to do so because He's already saved you. If you're someone that is kind of just like a mediocre person or does bad things, well, that's because you don't have God's blessing. Okay, so John Calvin and Martin Luther differ on a lot of things, and they will never really get along. So, very quickly within the Protestant Reformation, we see that Martin Luther splits off from the Catholic Church and forms his own religion, Protestant. But then, right afterwards, we have the Protestants split into two separate groups. We have the Lutherans, the followers of Martin Luther, and the Calvinites, who follow John Calvin. Now, these two groups are even going to splinter into multiple as well in the near future. That's all I have for you for today. We're going to take a look at the 95 thesis in class and actually get a little bit more of a better idea about what it means to really, in an articulate way, complain about something that you think is wrong. I look forward to seeing all of you guys in class. Have a great night.